Shalom, shalom, mishpacha v'habarim. Shalom ve'berachot, mishpacha v'harahim. That is peace and blessings to my family and friends. What's up? It's your girl 916 Shan here on the YouTube, on Facebook. I'm your girl Shan-t DoC. I know people like, man, what does the DOC mean in your name? Disciple of Christ. Shan-t, disciple of Christ. I don't think I've revealed that, but I'm here with my lovely brother BA, back at you once, and coming to you. I know people say, when's your next video? I like to take my time and bring forth some subjects. They might be cold cutting, but they're needed for the body of the Messiah right now. So before we get into it, I'm gonna have Brother BA introduce himself, and then we'll continue from there. Go ahead, Brother BA.
Greetings and much love to all of Israel, the flesh and the spirit. Much love to those, just much love to everybody. It's Brother BA, also known as BA Ben Abraham. I'm here with my sis. And yeah, it's been a minute since we've been linking up on the videos, but we're finna be back in full swing and full rotation, and coming soon down the line. We'll be doing some more work and more projects. We got a lot of stuff ahead. So today we just gonna scratch the surface a little bit and talk about these traditions of men. And go ahead, sis. I'm gonna fall back.
All right. So once again, I do want to say all praise to the Most High Yahweh, the Lord God of Israel, the Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. And yes, like BA said, we're going to talk about some of these traditions of men. I know today is Christmas Eve. BA and myself, we do not celebrate Christmas any longer. We used to celebrate it, of course, but once we've come to the knowledge of things and added that knowledge to our faith and had a more personal walk and relationship with the Father, we were convicted of some things and we made some choices for our personal walk. And Christmas Eve, tomorrow is Christmas. And I know a lot of Israelites, once they come into this walk, they say, well, I don't celebrate the holidays anymore. And that's great. That's great and dandy. And I give all praise to the Most High Yahweh for that. But the holidays we talk about, Halloween or harvest festivals, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter. And people say, okay, well, I no longer celebrate the holidays, but what some of the Hebrews or some of what we call ourselves as Israelites still do, not me, but some out there, and this is not to persecute anybody. This is just to put information out. But there's always this thing of saying I don't celebrate it anymore, and people say, okay, well, I don't celebrate it anymore, but I still go eat the food. And I came into this walk pretty much solid in about like 2013. I did think it was okay to still eat the food. I'm like, okay, I could just go watch the people, open presents. I could still watch the people do their festivities. I could still just go be around my family or whatever. And I could still eat the food. That's what I thought in the beginning. After more time spent with the Father, after researching the scripture over and over again, and also secular historical research, I come to find that the Most High Yahweh does equate eating the holiday food as still celebrating the abominable or detestable thing that he does not want you to be a partaker in. And we're going to see that from the scriptures. And we're also going to mainly focus on that from Paul. A lot of Christians, we call ourselves Christians, Messianics. We call ourselves Israelites or Hebrews, Judeo-Christians. More so people who focus on Paul, they want you to go to Paul and say, okay, well, what did Paul say about this? And Paul had a lot to say about not eating food sacrificed to idols. And before I let Brother BA give his overview and take, is when you're eating the holiday food, that holiday food is made in honor of that day's deity, power, or energy. It's made in honor of that day's God, so to speak. Okay, so when you're eating the food that was made in honor of that day, you're actually eating the food that's in honor of that deity, and that's equated to eating food sacrificed to idols. And the Father calls it joining yourself over to the ways of the nations. And we're going to go into that a little further. But BA, go ahead and give your take.
I would like to say pretty much what my sis was saying, and to go a little deeper, but I won't spend too long, but I won't say too much either. When it comes to Paul overall, there's a big misunderstanding. There's a big butchering of his writings and of his teachings. Paul was dealing with a lot of the social political structure of his day. So, and I tend to notice in the Hebrew community, even in the internet community, the internet Christian community as well, is that when it comes to social and political matters, there are not that many individuals that speak on these matters. They don't. When it comes to the word imperialism, I tend to notice, and my sis, we talked about this earlier, a lot of people, they don't even know what that is. And what people have to understand that Paul, he was battling, or he was in contention with the imperialists. And most high willing, in this teaching and over the next couple of weeks or months, and however how long we go with this series we're going to be doing, we'll bring more of that out and understand that Paul's writings he was dealing with empire. He was dealing with imperialism, a doctrine of individuals who want to come and take over and indoctrinate people. And this is what we're dealing with today. Today in this age, Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, and the various other holidays and the various other traditions are the doctrine of the imperialists, the rulers that come and take over lands and indoctrinate the people that live in them. And now I'm gonna fall back, and you go ahead, sis. Take it away.
All right. Thank you for that, BA. My goodness. The imperialists indoctrinating you to follow their ways or traditions they said or else. The imperialists brought this thing of imperial cult worship, pretty much the emperors back in Yeshua's time when he walked earth, 2nd, 3rd, 4th century. Those emperors wanted to be looked at as God. They wanted to be looked at as the creator themselves. And so they had you bringing them sacrifices. They had you bowing down to them. They had you worshiping them. And even some of their family members were deified as well. And a lot of the citizens in the Roman colonies had to go through this thing of the emperor cult worship or imperial cult worship. And, the Hebrews who lived during that time, they had to face this. And Paul or Shaul helped them with this a lot. It helped them. It helped the followers of the way make sure they were exempt from this type of thing, and they were educated as to who the real Lord or King kingdom was. So I'm going to be taking a look mainly at this book here. Let me get the glare off of it. Okay, it's called After Paul Left Corinth. The Influence of Secular Ethics and Social Change by Bruce Winter. And Bruce Winter says on the back of the book here, he's a director of the Institute of Early Christianity in the Greco-Roman world, Tyndale House, Cambridge, a fellow of St. Edmund's College, and a member of the Divinity Faculty, University of Cambridge. So he's pretty much a theologian, historian. He works with the archaeologists, and he compiles this information for us. And Bruce Winter, the book he's got that I have called Roman Wives, Roman Widows. This is a good one too. To bring you to light about what Paul was talking about in some of his letters. So we're going to be talking about 1 Corinthians chapter 8, 1 Corinthians chapter 10. All right, and we're going to read some of that, and then we're going to go over some of the main points that Paul was bringing out, and we're going to bring some secular historical information. As BA said, Paul was dealing with the social political issues that the followers of Yeshua had while they were living in these Roman colonies, and Corinth was a Roman colony. So, BA, we're going to start with 1 Corinthians chapter 8. If you could, my brother, please read all of 1 Corinthians chapter 8.
All right. 1 Corinthians chapter 8. And it reads, "Now concerning things offered to idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, love edifies. And if anyone thinks that he knows anything, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. But if anyone loves God, this one is known by him. Therefore, concerning the eating of things offered to idols, we know that an idol is nothing in the world, and that there is no other God but one. For even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as there are many gods and many lords." Many lords. Imperialism. "Yet for us there is one God, the Father, of whom are all things, and we for him, and one Lord, Yeshua or Christ, through whom are all things, and through whom we live. However, there is not in everyone that knowledge, for some, with consciousness of the idol, until now eat it as a thing offered to an idol, and their conscience being weak is defiled." Verse 8. "But food does not condemn us to God, for neither if we eat are we the better, nor if we do not eat are we the worse. But beware, lest somehow this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to those who are weak." Ain't that written in Leviticus? That Leviticus 19 or 20. Ain't that so? Man.
Yeah.
And Paul was a Torah teacher at that. You see where he getting his information and knowledge from. Let's keep going. Verse 10. "For if anyone sees you have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will not the conscience of him who is weak be emboldened to eat those things offered to idols?" It's a question. "And because of your knowledge shall the weak brother perish for whom Christ died. But when you thus sin against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ." Ain't that something? That's written in the Torah. Let's keep going. Verse 13. "Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never again eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble."
Right. I wanted to start from verse 13. It says over here in my version, ISR, it says, "Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I'm never again going to eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble." Paul is not saying I'm not going to ever eat food or meat again. He's just saying I'm never going to eat this meat, knowing where it comes from, in front of my brother who is weak in the faith. Weak in the faith means he's brand new. You know what I mean? He hasn't really got a solid foundational understanding to make a conscious choice about what he's eating and what he's not eating, where it was from, whether it was sacrificed to idols. So, we're going to start with after Paul left Corinth, chapter 12 here. And this chapter is called "The Imperial Cult, the Games and Dining in a Temple, in Idolatrous Temple." See, the thing is, we might got family, friends, loved ones, but the thing is, they temple is dedicated to who power, energy, or deity is dedicated to. You see what I'm saying? And we got to make sure, we can still fellowship with them. But the thing is, when at certain times not to fellowship with them, the Father say, okay, we don't need to dine up over there with them because they finna do this practice right then and there. You see what I'm saying? All right. So this section is called sitting at meat in an idol's temple. And this focuses on verse 10 of chapter 8, 1 Corinthians chapter 8, what BA just read. And it says, for if anyone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's place, shall not his conscience, if he is weak, be built up to eat food offered to idols? Right? So the thing is, if somebody see you and they know you know better, right? And the thing is, what we do influences another, right? Our actions, behaviors, they influence another. We could cause somebody else to stumble. They're not planted firmly in the word just yet to make a wise choice for themselves as to not to get into this practice. See what I'm saying? All right. So after Paul left Corinth, two highly significant and related events appear to have occurred at about the same time. The first, establishing a federal imperial cult, and it was distinct from local imperial cults in cities of Achaia. Now, this is Roman Corinth. Now, there is two Corinths. There's the Greek Corinth and there's the Roman Corinth. The Greek Corinth got sacked and burned in about 146 BCE, and then it was rebuilt up by Julian in 46 BCE. Okay, so we're talking about the one that was built back up. The federal, its creation, the federal imperial cult, its creation initiated by the province, and it was approved by the emperor and the Roman Senate. Right? So, you know, we got these politicians involved in these things, right? It was approved by the emperor and the Roman Senate. It was an annual event, and it was for a province to demonstrate to the emperor and Roman Empire its loyalty and support of Romanitas. Now, Romanitas, that's political and cultural concepts and practices that makes the Romans define themselves. You know, it's like an identity or self-image. Let me continue. So this federal imperial cult worship thing, right? It required financial contributions from all of the cities in the province, right? Argos, like a suburb in Achaia, complained about the substantial financial levy imposed on them. There go your finances, right? So Tiberius's cult thrived during his lifetime as an inscription from Cyzicus concerning a distinguished benefactress illustrates, displaying piety in all matters to the eternal house of Tiberius Sebastos Caesar, the greatest of the gods, and to his immortal rule dedicated to Polias, Athena, a cult statue of his mother, Sebaste Victorious. Receiving her priesthood from the city, she herself at the recent festival of the Panathenaea for the emperors satisfied everything related to piety towards the gods. We're setting up the introduction of what imperial cult worship was. These real people, these human beings were setting themselves up as these deified persons. All right. And then these deified persons also made sure that the people in their family were getting these titles as well. All right. So the fact is that the imperial cult grew more spectacularly throughout the empire during the Julio-Claudian and Flavian periods than the early Christian movement ever did. The establishment of a federal cult in Corinth was a matter of great political, social, and financial importance for the colony. So this is how they made their money, BA. This is how they made their money. This is how the Roman Empire made their money. So this chapter, the impact upon the Christian community of the new province-wide imperial cult established after Paul left Corinth. So it will discuss the newly formed federal imperial cult, how the Corinthian Christians handled the imperial cult while Paul was in Corinth, the reason why Christians dined in the temple after he left, and the attitude which some Christians took towards the federal imperial cult and the Isthmian Games. We're not going to talk about the Isthmian Games more so, but we're just going to talk about this federal imperial cult. Yeah, anything you want to say before I move on?
I would also like to add, Christianity after the 3rd and 4th century is also a doctrine of the imperialists. It's also backed by imperialism. So, Most High willing, and that's not a stab against Christ. Let me just clarify. We believe Christ to be the holy image of the Most High. We understand him to be the Messiah. We don't speak against Christ. We don't reject Christ here. We love Christ. We understand what he stands for. But Christianity, which has indoctrinated a number on our people and many other people in the world, that is a doctrine of imperialism as we know it today. Christianity, modern day Christianity. And Most High willing will continue to bring more of that information out. Go ahead, sis.
Yep. And Paul, Shaul, he wanted to establish that there was only one Lord, one God, and that was the Most High Yahweh through his son Yeshua. Paul was saying these emperors are not your deity. He was saying these are not your savior. So of course Paul was put in jail for saying this in the midst of all these imperialists. He was going against the grain of the land. Continue. This is a subsection of this chapter called the Federal Imperial Cult of Achaia. Okay? So this cult was an extremely important expression of Romanitas. Remember, Romanitas was the set of political and cultural concepts that made a Roman pretty much, right? So Romanitas, this was one reason why the cult became central in the minds of its citizens. Emperor worship was not a political subterfuge designed to elicit the loyalty of untutored provincials, but was one of the ways in which Romans themselves and provincials alongside them defined their own relationship with a new political phenomenon, an emperor whose powers and charisma were so transcendent to them as both man and God. I know you guys are saying, what does this have to do with food sacrificed to idols? Well, we're going to get to that in a hot second. We just have to do some intro information real quick. We're setting the foundation and the stage. Okay. So in the province of Asia, right? Asia Minor, where Paul went, right? The imperial cult and temple in the Roman colony of Aphrodisias were established from the time of the formal deification of Augustus in AD 14. So Augustus Caesar, he was deified too, right? An imperial god. So the provincial imperial cult for Augustus and Rome was founded in the Roman province of Galatia as early as 25 BCE, BA. So this imperial cult stuff was going on. Yeshua physically walked the land. And that was 70 years. This happened 70 years before the arrival of Christianity. So the Christianity that BA and I follow, we follow 1st century AD Christianity, not this 3rd, 4th century and later on. Go ahead, BA.
No, I got to step away for a few seconds. So go ahead. I'll be right back.
All right. Let me continue. So much of the most detailed evidence for the spread of emperor worship in the central Anatolian provinces comes from Galatia. So Anatolia was the original name for Asia Minor, or what is known as modern day Turkey, where Paul went and spoke to a lot of the Ephesians, Galatians, Philippians. Okay, so let's see here. In Galatia, the major Julio-Claudian imperial temple in the Roman colony of Pisidian Antioch, dating from the Middle to late Augustan period, has been uncovered. So the archaeologists have went and discovered these imperial cult worship temples, right? So in the province of Achaia, in Corinth in particular, is also evidence of its presence and growth. At the beginning of the 1st century, a Roman official named P. Cornelius Scipio the cult in Messene. And in Corinth, the deified Julius Caesar, who authorized the establishing of Corinth as a Roman colony, was venerated soon after his death. So the temple of Octavia, the site of the imperial cult in Corinth, was dedicated to the sister of Augustus, imperial woman on whom divine honors had been bestowed. And we're going to get more in depth about what divine honors were, right? So not only a deceased emperor, but also the reigning one, even 2 living members of the imperial family were venerated in the Julio-Claudian era. Some 11 figures, some included Agrippa Postumus, Antonio, the daughter of Claudius, even the powerful Antonia Augusta. She was deified while she was alive, and she was designated Goddess Antonia on a coin as early as AD 18 during the reign of Tiberius, and her cult was established in her lifetime at Ilium. So at Athens, Ilium is at Athens, Greece. So the relationship of her cult to the wider imperial one is recorded circa AD 18 in group into Rome and Augustus, Tiberius, Julia, Augusta, Antonia, and Agrippina. So we're establishing some archaeological artifacts that show intrinsically that historically this thing went on of imperial cult worship. All right, this validates history. So after Antonia's demise, Claudius supposedly built a temple in Rome, and she was seen to personify various goddesses, was specifically linked to Venus Genetrix, and this reflected the popular perception of her as the mother of the imperial gens, right? And presumably metaphorically as the mother of Rome. So in the Principate of Claudius, there was renewed interest in Aphrodite, and a marble statue of Antonia in the form of Venus, as Aphrodite, right, has been located. And given that Venus was the patroness of Roman Corinth, Antonia would have been included in the imperial veneration there, right? They worship these women too. So not only the men were worshipped, the women were worshipped, right? So let's see here. The forerunner to the provincial or federal imperial cult in Achaia was the celebration of imperial festivals on the accession of Gaius and Claudius by the Panachaian assembly. Important evidence and official petition. So important evidence. There is an official petition from the people of Argos, right, to the governor of the province. And there's also epigraphic evidence that shows that it was after Paul left Corinth that a new provincial imperial cult cities of the Achaean League in Corinth in AD 54, right? So the official petition from the city of Argos to the governor of the province, it complained about the large financial contribution they were compelled to make towards what they saw as unnecessary extravagance not central to the cult. And let me read that petition. It's a part of the petition. It says, "But now the Corinthians, since Argos has been assigned to their territory, for this is the less individuous way of expressing it, by the king city, have grown insolent and ill-doing and are compelling the Argives to pay them tribute. For it is not to furnish gymnastic or musical contests that the Corinthians need so much money, but they buy bears and panthers for the hunting shows, and they themselves, by reason of their wealth, are naturally able to support these great expenses." So the people of Argos were saying, you know, why we as citizens have to give up all this money for these extravagant shows when these people who have more money than us, more power and position than us, especially They have the means of providing these shows. Why are they asking us for this money? It's making a financial burden on us who are not so well to do. We're the middle class here, right? So
That sounds so familiar.
Go ahead.
Wow. History just repeats itself. There are people, and I'm not talking about nobody in particular. We're just talking about overall in general. We got people going broke, hurting themselves, committing social murder, social suicide themselves, because everybody's in their feelings right now. And when we bring this up, we're the bad guys. Go ahead, sis. I just had to say that. I'm sorry.
Right? No, it's like, yeah, why you want to put a hurt into our pockets? We don't want this, y'all want this. But since y'all want this and y'all got the means for it, won't y'all go ahead and put up the money? But this is called imperialism at its finest. The imperialists is like, man, we ain't coming out our pocket. You is, and we have the position and power to say so and demand it to do it. That's what we're going to do. Nothing new under the sun. And this is why, BA and I, we always put this information out that what we have over here in the westernized world is borrowed from Greece and Rome. What we're dealing with now is what these people dealt with back then over in Anatolia. And this is talked about in the Bible. Okay, let me continue. So, an inscription records first high priest of the federal cult, and that was Gaius Julius Spartacus. He was a major benefactor and patron of Corinth, and he held this priesthood for life. All right, so this is an inscription here. The inscription is this: the tribesmen of the Calpurnian tribe set up this statue on account of his excellence. That's what they call him, and unsparing and most lavish generosity, both to the divine family and our colony, for their patron Gaius Julius Spartacus. Flanfied Julius, twice quinquennial Duovier, president of the Isthmian and Caesarean Sebastian Games, high priest for life and house, the first of the Achaeans to hold this office. So this guy, for the first high priest of the federal cult, imperial cult, Gaius Julius Spartacus, right? So with customary praise, this inscription records liturgies of Spartacus, but his role as Achaea's first priest of the imperial cult. So they had their own priest, BA. You know what I mean? To do these liturgies or services over this imperial cult worship. Man.
What comes next when you do service? When you get together, what comes next after that? Now you're getting somewhere. The money's gonna be spent, but it's the festivities. People are gathering together, spend money. They're spending money, and what else they finna do? They got to go eat.
Oh, they got to go eat. Yep. Yeah. We getting it to them. We getting it to them. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. See, it's all tied together, ain't it? That's the thing that I wanted to bring out. It's all tied together. When somebody tries to separate little elements from these things, festivities, and stuff like that, it's like, yo, you got to see how the Most High looked at it. And you got to see how it was reiterated that these elements could not be separated. They went hand in hand. So this priest now, the priest of the federal or provincial cult, could be granted permission by the emperor to wear a crown and the purple in procession. So they was making them out to be royalty. Royalty. Crown and purple, a symbolism of royalty. Somebody to be looked up to and praised, right? And obeyed, pretty much. Right? So the Asian assembly shows that the inhabitants of Pergamum had expectations concerning the annual celebration of the provincial imperial cult. And so this is the decree. Watch this. It says, since one should each year make clear display of one's piety and of all holy fitting intentions towards the imperial house, the choir of all Asia, gathering at Pergamon on the most holy birthday of Sebastos Tiberius Caesar God, performs a task that contributes greatly to the glory of Sebastos in hymning, singing, house, and performing sacrifices to the Sebastian gods and conducting festivals and feasts. That was the decree, a state decree, the provincial decree. So at Messene in Achaia, a Roman official instructed all to wear crowns and to sacrifice before the statue of the emperor, keeping themselves free from work. There is evidence of householders sacrificing on altars outside their homes as the procession celebrating the cult passed by. Imperial altars have been found in Achaia, Athens, and Sparta, and in Asia Minor, where Paul went. AD 54, announcing the accession of Nero, invited all to wear wreaths and sacrifice oxen. That's that sacrifice that you have to give to these deified human beings as they were looked at as gods. You were told to sacrifice before the emperor. That was a festival, and the part of this festival was these feasts. Okay, let me continue. So Tertullian indicated that it was assumed that everyone would take part in that festive attire, including crowns should be worn, and laurels and lamps should be hung on the doors of their homes. What does that sound like? There were also expectations that each person would offer up his own libation with wine and incense before images of imperial gods, usually the priest. Okay? So while aspects of the celebration of the cult differed from city to city, it is certain, BA, that everyone was under obligation to participate. You want to say anything before I move on, BA?
Keyword, obligate. Think about it. Now, before you move on, I want to read something in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. No, I'm sorry. Chapter 11. Let's just go. It's just 2 verses, and then you can move on. This is what we're talking about with Paul. This is how we line up Paul historically to what my sis is reading. 1 Corinthians chapter 11. We're going to pick it up in verse 1. Imitate me, as I also imitate Christ. Now I praise you, brethren, that you remember in all things and keep the traditions just as I delivered them to you. Why would he stress that? Because what you're reading historically, sis, this is what was happening in the day when he was teaching this. But you know what some people will say? BA, that's your interpretation. Because people would do anything to stay in the traditions of man. Or what they'll do, they'll dress it up and say, well, we do it for the kids. Or we do it because it's family. No. If the tradition was not introduced to you, you wouldn't be doing it in the first place. Go ahead, love. I'm done.
Correct. No, that's that obligation, right?
Exactly.
Who told you you were obligated to keep this tradition? And the thing is, all traditions are not bad, but we got to see where the root of these traditions come from. Are they the traditions set in stone by the Most High Yahweh? Or are they traditions set by man? Now, this is the thing. By man is not automatically bad, but you got to check out its roots. Okay? And also, the tradition is not a have to. It's not a have to. And a tradition, when it's made like it's a commandment coming from the Most High, that's a violation. That's a nullification of the Most High Yahweh's words over the traditions of the Most High, like they are have tos. So, but yeah, this is what Paul was doing in his day. If the information that I was saying earlier, the imperial cult worship of Augustus and Rome, it was already in Galatia in 25 BCE. It was happening before Yeshua physically roamed the earth. So let's continue here. All right, so we're going to talk about, we're still in this book. We're still in this book after Paul left Corinth. Gotta get the glare off. Okay, there we go. All right. And this is another subsection of the chapter called the Corinthian Christians and the imperial code. Now we're going to see to deal with this. See, the thing about it is the Corinthians, the Corinthian Christians knew they still had to follow the laws of the land. Right? But they didn't want to, they knew some laws of the land went against the Most High Yahweh. So this is the concerns that they wrote about to Paul. You see what I'm saying? All right. Like before I read one of the laws of the land here in the United States of America is that a man can quote unquote marry a man and a woman can quote unquote marry a woman. But the thing is, that's a law of the land that's in play. But we know that law of the land goes against the Most High Yahweh's law. So therefore, just because the United States of America has that law doesn't mean we got to go and follow it. You see what I'm saying? We don't follow it. We don't follow that law of the land. We don't believe in that law of the land. But for people who do, that's what they do. They follow the laws of the land. But
and you
when
know
the
what?
law go ahead, yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, finish your thought, and I'll interject in. No, because I was just going to land back what you just said when it comes to the same-sex marriage and things of that nature. Notice that was also a doctrine of the imperialists. What's his name? Nero?
Nero.
Was he not considered a god?
Yeah, he was a homosexual.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah. Yeah, there's some history, BA. There's some history. Actually, I don't know if it's from this book in particular, but there's some information that seeing with these flat-chested, dressed in women attire. So it was presumed that some little adolescent, flat-chested, dressed in the women's attire was actually a little boy. But go ahead, BA.
Now, it's just funny how history just repeats itself. And like you just said, King Solomon, what did he say? There's nothing new under the sun. And now I fall back. What do you think, sis?
All right. So the Corinthian Christians was like, yo, this imperial cult worship thing right here, it's against the law of the Most High Yahweh, but it is the law of the land. Paul, we need your help. All right. So let's continue here. This is called the Corinthian Christians. So how did Gentile Christians cope with the obligations to worship the imperial gods while Paul was in Corinth? Almost 30 years ago, a professor named F. Millar posed the question, but when Gentiles began to convert to Christianity, might we not expect that the pagan communities in which they live will begin to use against them the accusation of not observing the imperial cult? So in Acts chapter 18, verses 12 through 17, their charge was that Paul was deceptively misleading others to the worship of God contrary to the law. That law that he was accused of being contrary to was the law of the land, not the law of Moses. See, we have to understand in Paul's day, there were like 3 different laws, but you have to look at context. There was Mosaic law, or the law of Moses, which is Torah, law, which was the Pharisees and the Judaizers trying to impose on people the traditions of men. And then there was state or colony law. Okay? So Acts chapter 18, could you read that for a second, BA? Acts chapter 18, verses 12 to 17.
All right, let me get to it.
Yep.
You said Acts 18, right?
Yep, Acts chapter 18, verses 12 to 17.
You know what's so crazy about the book of Acts is that a lot of individuals who subscribe to Christendom, they run to the book of Acts to use it as a weapon against the Torah.
Yeah, but once you understand the social, political climate and the history back then, you'll actually see Acts make some sort of sense.
Exactly. It is Acts chapter 18, verse 12.
Yes, verses 12 to 17.
And it reads, when Gallio was proconsul of Achaia, the Jews with one accord rose up against Paul and brought him to the judgment seat, saying, this fellow persuades men to worship God contrary to the law. And notice in the King James, when the Torah is normally brought up, the law is capital. The word law is capitalized.
That's right.
But they want to always talk about we don't know the text. Okay. But let's keep going. 14. And when Paul was about to open his mouth, Gallio said to the Jews, if it were a matter of wrongdoing or wicked crimes, O Jews, there would be reason why I should bear with you. 15. But if it is a question of words and names in your own law, small letters, look to it yourselves, for I do not want to be a judge of such matters. And he drove them from the judgment seat. Then all the Greeks took Sosthenes, the ruler of the synagogue, and beat him before the judgment seat, but Gallio took no notice of these things. So Paul still remained a good while. Then he took leave of the brethren and sailed for Syria, and Priscilla and Aquila were with him. He had his hair cut off at Caesarea, for he had taken a vow.
All right, so done with 17, right? So this is when Paul, and we have secular historical information, BA, that shows the political climate of why Paul got kicked on out. It's starting to make a little sense, right, BA? Okay. See, this is for all of us. This was for me too. Like I said, I done been corrected a few times in this walk. And I love continually being corrected because I want to make sure I'm having everything right and tight in my personal relationship, with the Most High Yahweh and his son Yeshua. Let me continue. So Paul was saying, Paul was being accused of misleading others to worship somebody else than the imperial gods. Who was Paul saying to worship? Okay, so let me continue. So the term anapeto, I'm reading the Greek. Anapeto does not mean persuade. Okay, so this is in verse 4 of Acts chapter 18. So the word peto used in Acts chapter 18 verse 4 used to describe Paul's activities in the Corinthian synagogue. Okay, so we're going to look at that term just a little bit. So the former term, right, is used in legal settings to indicate that a person has operated out of deceit in order to mislead or seduce others. So we're going to look at these words. It's critical to get the proper Greek rendering of the word when you're looking at New Testament verses. So Liddell and Scott cite Acts chapter 18, verse 13, classification seduce or mislead. Okay, that word seduce or mislead. That's what they're saying it is there. All right. So after hearing Jewish submission, Gallio first ruled that under Roman law, Paul was not guilty of a felony. The word felony in the Greek is adikeme. What is that? No, adikema, or political misdemeanor, which is the word. What is that? Padiur gema. I'm reading actually the Greek words. Excuse me. All right. He had committed no criminal offense. This is what went down in Acts chapter 18. This is what Gallio said to Paul. They took Paul to Gallio. Gallio was the proconsul or the governor of the province at that time that Paul was in Corinth. And so Paul was accused of misleading, but Gallio said, according to Roman, he ain't really misleading nobody. So the issues in contention in the case, Gallio observed there were three. So the first term, logos, he was accused of, was the peri logos kai onamaton kai nomo tu kato umas. So the first term, logos, carries a wide range of meanings when used in the semantic field of law. So this is the Acts chapter 18, verse 14, right? So it can refer to a debate. The word logos can refer to a debate, an argument, a law, a rule of conduct, or a declaration of legal immunity. A declaration of legal immunity. So if the last meaning, a declaration of legal immunity, was the essence of one of the charges, then it suggests that the Jews had contested any application of their immunity from participating in the imperial cult to the Christian community. So you know what that means? It means pretty much that they were contesting that they had to participate. They were contesting that they didn't have obligation to participate in this imperial goddess worship sacrifice stuff, because they were known to have a religion all their own, and they already had a deity to sacrifice to. All right. So the status of Christianity in relation to the cult was thereby declared, not for the whole empire, but for the province of Achaia, where Gallio exercised his imperium as governor. So exercised his supreme power as governor, right? So the governor's actions are only subject to cancellation by the princeps or emperor if he chooses to intervene from his imperium maius, or overriding power, right? So that's his supreme power, or overriding power. So it was only if the prosecuting Jews possessed some special privilege, such as Roman citizenship, that they would have the right of appeal to the emperor against Gallio's decision. Claudius had evicted the Jews from Rome, and appeal would hardly succeed at this stage of Jewish imperial relations. So Gallio's decision meant that the imperial cult at this stage would create no problems for Christians as provincials. Converts would not have to participate in it, and Jewish Christians were already exempt by reason of their ancient religious traditions. So when people say, oh, the Jews and the Christians got different rules and regulations, that's not true from what we see historically. The Jewish Christians already were exempt because they were already known, like I said, to have their ancient traditions following the law of Moses. You want to add something, BA?
Yo, sis.
Okay, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I was looking at the Thayers.
Okay.
And Thayer says something very interesting. Let's see. Where was I at? And it reads, a different law from that which God has given.
For which word? For which word?
For the same word you just said. It's the same word. And the word is, I have a hard time pronouncing it. It's in Greek right here, but it's the same word. It's for those. It's 427D in the Thayers. In the Strongs, it's 3551, I believe. And it is nomos.
Oh, you're talking about the word
Law. In Acts.
Let's look it up in the give me the Strong's number 4, BA.
The Strong's number is 3551.
3551.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll look it up in the Liddell Scott's 3551.
And the Thayer says, and it reads, and received by a usage, a custom usage law. In the New Testament, a command law of any law whatsoever. It's not exclusive to Torah.
Oh, nomos,
yeah,
yeah.
By the observance of which we are approved, a precept or injunction, the things prescribed by divine will. So it has various meanings. You know what I'm saying? The mention of divine law, because those things, even which in opposition to this law, impelled to action, and therefore seem to have the force of a law, to be designated by the term, a different law from that which God has given. This is what Thayers is saying. This is what Thayers has to say about it. The homeboy Thayers.
Right. So what Galileo was saying, like, look, okay, we know
the law of the land.
Right. The law of the land, Galileo is saying, y'all know, we know y'all Jewish Christians don't have to do because we know y'all follow the law of Moses. And we know this goes against the law of Moses because you're only supposed to sacrifice or worship that deity, Yahweh Elohim, right? Ain't that
so?
If
anyone goes to Acts chapter 18, try to say they was talking about the law of Moses, they have not done their homework.
Right, and this is why I say this is good, BA, that I, was led to do this, because Paul's letters are hard to understand for people who don't go back and look at the time, the people, the culture, the laws of those colonial lands. If you don't go back and look at that stuff, you're going to get lost. You're going to get lost in the sauce. You're not going to know that he's in the midst of 3 different laws going on. There's one word, law, for every in the New Testament. And the context and the history is going to tell you which law is being referred to at all times. So this is pretty good. Um. Okay. Let's do this, BA. We're going to read another subsection in this book called Christians Dining in the Temple After Paul Left Corinth. Christians dining in the temple after Paul left Corinth. Now, this was not the temple of the Most High Yahweh. This was the temple of idols. All right. So we're going to talk about this word rights. So remember in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, let's see. It was talking about a right. In verse 9, chapter 8, verse 9, it says, but look to it, lest somehow this right of yours. We're going to talk about these rights. Now, people say just because you have a right to means you should do it. But even in 1 Corinthians 10, which we're going to get to in a little while, it says, all things are permitted to me, but are they beneficial? Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. Right? All right. This section talks about rights. So Paul noted had reclined in the idol temple, IDOL temple, at a feast, and did so on the grounds of what he emphatically described as this right of yours. Right? He exousia humon aute. Right? I'm reading the Greek. I'm not reading a transliteration. I'm reading the Greek, so bear with me. All right. So Paul was saying the Christians were sitting down at these idol temples eating, talking about they had this right. Right? So they also encouraged weak Christians who had reservations about reclining at dinner in the temple to do the same as they did. Whew, that sounds like some peer pressure to me. Okay, let me continue. The confident Christians exercise their right. And the word right in the Greek is exousia. Right? So the confident Christians exercise their right to do so. It was not their liberty, as some translations suggest, because the term does not mean that, but rather refers to some right they possessed in Corinth. They didn't have the liberty, they just had the right. So Paul explains that he chooses not to exercise certain rights that he has. So let's read that, BA. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 4 to 6. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 4 to 6. Can you get that for me real quick? So if Paul is saying, like you said in 1 Corinthians 11, follow me as I follow Christ, and do the traditions as we have taught them to you, because the traditions we've taught to you come from the original traditions set by the Most High Yahweh. And if Paul is saying, if I don't exercise these certain rights, why is y'all don't exercise these rights? Go ahead, exactly. BA. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 4 to 6.
Corinthians chapter 9, 4 through 6. And it reads, do we have no right to eat and drink? Do we have no right to take along a believing wife, as do also the other apostles, the brothers of the Lord, and Cephas?
Peter.
Okay. Or is it only Barnabas and I who have no right to refrain from working? He's asking questions. He's asking questions here
about these rights.
Exactly.
We got rights, but the thing is, so what if we got rights? Just because we got rights don't mean we should do them.
Exactly.
Don't mean we are going to do them.
Like in America, you have privileges, but you don't have to do them. Let's keep going. Verse 7.
See? No, we're done. We're done with that, BA. We're done. I just wanted to bring that up.
Okay.
But the thing is, and what me and BA are going to explain is that, people say, well, can I eat, period, on Halloween? Can I eat on Thanksgiving? Can I eat on Christmas and Easter? Yes, you can eat. You can eat in your own house. You know what I mean? You have your own stove. You have your own food. If you at your house are not celebrating that day and are not making food in honor of that deity on that day, yeah, go ahead and cook a regular meal. Right? But we're saying just because you have the right to eat in the idol temple doesn't mean you should. Especially if it's not going to build one another up in the faith. Let me continue. So Paul explains that he chooses not to exercise certain rights that he has, and that he is keen to make his gospel without charge, so as not to use the full, not to use to the full his right. Right? He had a right to get paid a salary, but he didn't use his right. He was like, man, I'm just doing this, out the kindness of my heart. Right? All right. So he had rights, but he didn't use his rights, So there were some Christians who decided that they would exercise a particular right to eat in the idol temple. Okay, so those at the temple of Asclepius were there for healing. Some attended the temple of Demeter and Kore for delivering curses against adversaries. Let me pause right there. Asclepius. Yes, he was a god of healing, and people brought to him in his temple, they brought to him like replicas of body parts. And these replicas of body parts would symbolize the body part that they needed healing from. And the temple of Demeter and Kore. There's a story of what is it? Persephone and Persephone. I know Demeter is highly associated with Thanksgiving because she's like the goddess of the grain and the goddess of corn. So if you go into some historical information about these mystery religious cults and things like that, about Demeter and Kore and Persephone and all that stuff, about her daughter getting abducted by the god, and she had to go get her daughter rescued from the god and all this crazy stuff. So and this was going on at this time. Some of the people in the land, man, they was all up into these gods and goddesses, just deifying. All right. So Paul did not say that Corinthian Christians were simply attending some form of worship in the temple, but that they were there by right. And some Christians had participated in feasts, reclining in the traditional way at dinner in the temple. So that was pretty much doing the same thing IDOL worshipers were doing. Right? So, and later Paul recounted that they had drunk from the cup of demons and were partaking at the table of demons. Right? We'll get to that in chapter 10, verse 21. So Paul issued a strong warning against those who sat down to eat and drink and enjoy the subsequent activities, including immorality. And some of that immorality was brothel keepers supplying prostitutes for after dinners for those attending the banquets in temple of Poseidon. So by a process of elimination based on extant evidence, it is suggested that the dining rights to which Paul refers were connected with entertainment at the Isthmian Games. BA, since I read a reference to it, could you read 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and we're going to read 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and I want you to read all the way from verse 1. Um, all the way from verse 1 to verse 23. So verses 1 to 23, I would like you to read 1 Corinthians chapter 10.
All right, for sure.
Yep.
Okay, cool. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Moreover, brethren, I do not want you to be unaware that all our fathers were under the cloud, all passed through the sea, all were baptized into Moses in the cloud in the sea. All ate the
They were
same
baptized into Moses. They were immersed in the words of Moses, right? That's what he's saying, right?
Exactly.
Okay, keep going.
And there's some things in the Torah that I want to bring out later on too, because the Torah warns us against idolatry. It's all over the Torah and the prophets. But verse 3, all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank of the spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ, or I should say Messiah, right? But with most of them, God was not well pleased, for their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. Now, these things became our examples, to the intent that we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted. And do not become idolaters, as were some of them, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. I think that's Exodus 32.
That's Exodus 32. What was they doing? Idolaters. What was idolaters doing? Eating and drinking and playing.
Yeah, that's a golden calf. Let's keep going. Verse 8. Nor let us commit sexual immorality, as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 fell. Nor let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted and were destroyed by serpents. Nor complain, as some of them also complained and were destroyed by the destroyer. We know what that is. Let's keep going. Verse 11. Now all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the age have come. Therefore, let him who
admonition is warning, right? So these things were written as examples for us, for warning us.
Exactly. Right. Like it says in Ezekiel chapter 3, warn the people of me. And if you don't, blood will be on your hands. So we are warning you, brothers and sisters. We're not trying to scare you with no spookism. This is all true. If we don't put this information out, the Most High gonna hold us responsible.
That's right.
Let's keep going. Verse 13. Let's go to verse 12. I'm sorry. Therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. Therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. I speak as to wise men. Judge for yourselves what I say. In other words, do the research. Look it up. Keep going. Verse 15. No, 16, I'm sorry. The cup of blessings which we bless is not the communion of, the cup of blessing which we bless is not the communion of the blood of Christ. The bread which we break.
Hold up, yeah. It says the cup of blessing which we bless, is it not a sharing?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, not yet.
Yep.
My fault reading too quick. The cup of blessing which we bless, is it not the communion of the blood of Christ? The bread which we break, is it not the communion of the body of Christ? He's asking two questions there. For we thought many are one bread and one body, for we all partake of that one bread. Observe, Israel, after the flesh. Are not those who eat of the sacrifice partakers of the altar? What am I saying then? That an idol is anything, or what is offered to idols is anything? Rather that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to God. and I do not want you to have fellowship with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the Lord's table and of the table of demons. Or do we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? That's another question. Like, how dare you? 23. All things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful. Let me read that one more time. 23 again. All things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but not all things edify.
So, BA. So I'm gonna continue with what we're going through, but I want to go back because I want y'all to understand what Paul is trying to say to us. The thing is, with these holidays and the people saying, "Come on over and just get you a plate," y'all done made that food. Y'all done made that food in honor of the deities. That's idol worship. You know what I mean? You might not know it. Your family might not know it. You know what I mean? But the whole thing is, when your family say, "Come on, just get you a plate," it's just food. When the pastor, preacher, minister, teacher, rabbi, Moray say, just go ahead and get you a plate, it's just food. Tell them what Paul said. Tell them, say, hey, the Father's going to provide a way of escape for you tempted to go over to your family or friend's house and just get some food. And then, 18. Back in verse 18, BA, he says, "Are not those who eat of the sacrifices sharers in the slaughter place?" So when you eating of the food, you partaking in their offering. The offerings, BA, even back in Leviticus, what did the priests do with the offerings? They ate them. Eating the food made in honor of the deity, right? You are eating and partaking at the table of demons. You are drinking from the cup of demons. And the thing is, it says you can't serve two masters. You can't serve the adversary and the Most High Yahweh at the same time. And here, go ahead, BA. You want to say something?
Yeah, you can't serve two masters. This is the word of the Messiah himself, the master teacher. He said you're going to love one and hate the other. In the Shema, it says to love the Most High with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and to love thy neighbor as you love thyself. These are the commandments. You cannot do nothing other than what we just spoke of. Love the Most High with all your heart and all thy soul, and to love thy neighbor as you love thyself. And just the Shema by itself, that by itself just destroys any other doctrine when it comes to these multiple God facades I keep hearing about, like the Trinity and various other things. So, but I'm gonna fall back and I'm gonna let my sister continue.
All right. So what we're gonna go and look at now, what we're gonna look at now is BA. I don't know if you saw, but some of the people were writing to Paul, and Paul's response is pretty much he's saying, y'all is over here trying to justify that you can go overhead. Paul was saying y'all over here trying to justify that you can go ahead and eat in the idol temple and drink. Because you know in your mind there's only one Elohim. You know there's only the Most High Yahweh. But the thing about it is, Paul was saying, just because you have this right, bro, you know better. You're supposed to do better. You know these people over here that made this food in honor of their deities and not your deity. So why is you up in here doing that? And then you trying to persuade these other new babies in the faith to do the same, talking about, there's only one Elohim. There's only one Elohim. These deities they sacrificing to, they ain't really Elohims anyway. So what's the deal? They were trying to make a justification for it, BA. Ain't that's what we do today? We justify it. Oh, it's just food. We need nourishment. They cook. Why are we gonna be over here alone at our house? Everybody over at Mama's house. Everybody over at Pawpaw's house. Everybody over there chilling. It's just food. We know we don't serve their deity, but let's just go ahead and eat anyway.
You know what I heard before? The Lord wants you to at least eat something. Yeah, but I can go somewhere else to get something to eat. Yeah. Go ahead, sis.
See, I got to get to it. So this is what Paul had to say about the Jewish Christians trying to justify their right to go eat some food sacrificed to idols. This is called justification. The question is, on what grounds did some Christians defend their participation in a meal in a pagan temple? Their justification was this. 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 4 to 6, and reads, so then concerning the eating of food offered to idols, we know that an idol is no matter at all in the world, and that there is no other Elohim but one. For even if there are so-called mighty ones, whether in heaven or on earth, as there are many mighty ones and many masters, for us there is one Elohim, the Father, from whom all came and from whom we live, and one Master, Yeshua, Messiah, though all came and through whom we live. So that was their little justification. They're like, man, yeah, we know. They ain't really no guys. We know there's guys out here, but they ain't really no guys. That was their little justification. So this is what Paul had to say. So the thing is, they knew, these Jewish Christians or Judeo-Christians knew that an idol was only a carving. The Christians also knew that there is no God but one. Paul's description of the so-called gods and lords indicated that they were popularly but erroneously so designated in the minds of Corinthian Christians. Let me say that again. Paul's description of the so-called gods and lords indicated that they were popularly but erroneously designated in the minds of Corinthian Christians. So in the clause, for even though there are the so-called gods, the word eper can be used to imply that the statement is contrary to fact, while the use of as in as there are many gods and many lords, that can be translated just as indeed, which indicates the presence of the images of many gods and many lords in Corinth, a fact verified by Pausanias' description of temples on his visit to this city. So the deified living emperor and members of the imperial family would have been identified among those divinities upon the earth, in contrast to the deceased imperial ones, for example, those in heaven. You see? So the lack of gender references did not invalidate the title for female members of the imperial family, because Aphrodite was sometimes addressed as lady or goddess, and likewise as god or lord. So therefore, deified emperors and living members were judged to be among the so-called gods. And that's for example, popularly but erroneously called gods, the ones who were still living, BA. So they knew better. So Paul was like, man, enough with your justification. You know better. You talking about they so-called. Paul was saying, don't deify these people. So okay, let's see. Okay, we're gonna close this chapter out, and we're gonna talk about the Christians, the cult, and the games. But we didn't talk about the Isthmian games here. But we wanted to more so focus on this meat sacrifice to idols. So we can conclude that by reason of Gallio's judgment, Christians were exempt from participating in pagan festivals and quasi-civic events in temples. After Paul left Corinth, the imperial cult had assumed even greater importance in the capital of Achaia. The pharaoh cult, okay, brought even greater prestige to Corinth. So, in light of these important developments in Corinth's religious cum cultural life, some socially privileged Christians felt that they could justify theologically the exercising of their rights to attend such festivals, in particular the ones held in the vast complex of the Temple of Poseidon at Isthmia. After all, they argued, the Christian doctrine of God implied that an idol was nothing. God and one Lord, and there were no problems reclining in the temple to enjoy the dinner. So, some Stoic and Epicurean philosophers in the Claudian period whose teaching opposed idolatry and participation in such worship in De Natura Deorum permitted their adherents to participate in popular cultic activities as a compromise. See, even the philosophers knew, that it wasn't cool to be participating in these things, but they just said go ahead and pretty much compromise. You know what I mean? Go along to get along. Ain't that's what we see, BA? Say, well, so they let the people of the philosophers adhere to participate in these activities as a compromise, but warned them not to treat such activities seriously. You're gonna get in the activity, you know what I mean? You're gonna go hard in it. You know what I mean? You just can't go half tail in an activity, especially a game. You know how competitive games are when you're in it. You're just really serious about it, right? So Herod the Great, king of the Jews, had built a temple to Augustus and Rome. So Philip built one at Bethsaida in AD 30, right? Right after Christ was killed, after he was killed, buried, and resurrected, right? So, however, Palestinian Jews did not endorse this method, which their rulers used to demonstrate their loyalty to Rome. So the Jews of Palestine and the diaspora never participated in the cult, and Jews were able to support Romanitas, demonstrating their loyalty to Rome insofar as they offered up a sacrifice for the emperor in the temple in Jerusalem. So Professor S. Mitchell recently concluded his discussion of the imperial cult in Anatolia with this interesting observation. Okay, he said, one cannot avoid the impression that the obstacle which stood in the way of the progress of Christianity and the force drawn new adherents back to conformity with the prevailing paganism was the public worship of the emperors. It was not a change of heart that might win a Christian convert back to paganism, but the overwhelming pressure to conform imposed by the institutions of his city and the activities of his neighbors. What that sound like, DA? The pressure. The pressure to get you back over here to doing what we do. Just come on and get over here and have a plate.
And you know what? And this is another way of the Most High trying us too. Because the world is so full of so many enticing spirits and temptation. So the Most High, he's going to continue to try us. So that's just something for all of Israel and all those who subscribe to the ways of the Most High of Christ through the form of Torah to remember that there are many forces out here in this day and age as we speak that are trying us. And then it's the Most High who's doing it. The Most High is using them to try us. So even around this time of year, we have to be encouraged and continue to endure, because even our own families will come against us. But we know it's the Most High. We know it's him trying us, strengthening us, and preparing us, because there's going to be a time to where things are going to get much harder and harder. So right now, this ain't nothing but just a little bit. There's going to be some times to where it's going to get worse and worse and worse. We're in the middle of a famine. We're in the process of a famine right now. And I yield.
Yep. All right, so let me continue. All right. All right, so for Paul, the question of conscience was a critical factor in the determining behavior, right? It was out of respect for the conscience of the person that he indicated to the Christian at a private dinner that the food had been offered to idols. Okay, so let me say that again. It was out of respect for the conscience of the person that he indicated to the Christian at a private dinner that the food had been offered to idols. So, ought to have stopped the persons seeking to cajole or persuade in a flattering way, right? Seek to persuade in a flattering way these Christians with weak consciences to join the theologically nimble at the feast in the temple. So Paul was deeply concerned that if the latter did so, then they would commit apostasy and perish. Christ died. So Pliny the Elder, he used the imperial coat against the accused to determine whether they were Christian or apostates from that faith. And he recorded that those in the latter bracket willingly worshipped the emperor. Right? So religious pluralism in general and the central place of the imperial court in Politeia, or the city-state, must have created enormous for early Christians. Yeah? And Tertullian agreed that while Christians participated in civic life, they did not worship gods or offer sacrifices for the emperors, only prayers. That's what they offered. They offered you a prayer that you could go get it right. Even though this resulted in accusations of sacrilege and treason. And Tertullian, he records that Christians referred to the emperor as Lord, but not Lord in God's place. Okay? So, however, they were counted as public enemies, right? The Judeo-Christians definitely were counted as public enemies, right? So Tertullian and his generation of Christians observed the birthday of the emperor and his predecessors with a good conscience, with chastity, sobriety, and virtue. Not all in the first century Christian community in Corinth could affirm the same of their conduct. So the imperial cult was of great importance in the empire in promoting Romanitas. After Paul left Corinth, it assumed even greater importance in the capital, with the new pharaoh cult centered there. And indeed, Achaea's public life explains why some Christians sought a theological justification for attending. They argued that an idol has no existence and there is no God but one. And the changed circumstances and the theological knowledge some Christians possessed permitted them to participate in the festivities in the temple, although their exemption from joining in the imperial cult was ipso facto given through Gallio's ruling. And that means absolute fact, right? So Paul was concerned that weak Christians would be drawn back into the world of paganism and finally become apostate. So the strong were also in far greater danger of falling. Don't we see that? Paul concluded part of his response with, or let one who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall. That what pagans sacrifice, they offer to demons and not to the Most High Yahweh. I do not want you to be in partnership with demons, whom they perceived, not least of all, being in confrontation with God. Big G, right? So ancient evidence uncovered to date provides important material confirming the introduction of the federal imperial cult to Corinth, right? There is no date recorded as to when the federal imperial cult actually began, but Spalforth has suggested the accession of Nero in AD 54 or earlier for the latter. So the particular problem for New Testament scholars is how to account for the changed circumstances lying behind Paul's long argument on this critical issue. Solid tradition could be cited, even though he commended them for being diligent in observing them in the following verses. So that's that about 1 Corinthians chapter 8 through chapter 10, verses 1 to pretty much 20, 23, 24. All right. We have another chapter to do. BA, you got some time? All right. So before I move on, there anything you want to add, BA? Before we
Nah,
go?
this is good, man. Like I said, I'm just following along. You take lead and I follow, sis. Go do your thing.
Yeah, this is pretty interesting. You
Very.
people say Paul is hard to understand. Yeah, it's hard to understand if you don't know who he was talking to and what political, social parameters he was dealing with.
And
And
it's
now we see it.
and one thing about it, we don't hear this often in the camps. We don't hear this in the churches. I know the brothers in Buffalo, New York, and I'm not saying they're the only brothers that have touched on these matters, but those are the only brothers that I am aware of that touch on this topic of food being sacrificed to idols and dealing with the imperial cult worship and dealing with the social structure and the political powers in the days of Paul. I know the brothers in Buffalo, they are known for dealing with these type of matters. And like again, it's not common that it's hurting the other camps. But if there are other camps out there, much love to you. We're not saying nobody else is not doing it. What we're saying is that it's not common. So that's one thing we want to push because we don't hear it amongst Israel. Israel want to debate and fight over petty things. So we don't hear enough of this. And the brothers who bring information out like this, these are the brothers that we need to get next to and build with and hold on to and continue to teach the rest of our people and the rest of the nations. Well what exactly in the apostles were in Corinthians? What the apostle were?
We're gonna pick it up, BA, at First Corinthians chapter 10, verses
From where I left off at?
well, sort of. We're gonna pick it up at we're gonna read verses 25 to 29.
All right, let me get to it.
Yeah, First Corinthians chapter 10, verses 25 to 29. And I want to again say all praise to the Most High Yahweh for
All
my spirit
praises
being
do it.
led to this. Yeah, for my spirit being led to this, because this has helped me tremendously, and I hope it helps and edifies all those who are watching and we're going to watch later.
Okay. First Corinthians chapter 10, we're gonna pick it up at verse 25, and it reads: Eat whatever is sold in meat markets, asking no questions for conscience sake. For the earth is the Lord's in all its fullness. If any one of those who do not believe invites you to dinner, and you desire to go, eat whatever is set before you, asking no question for conscience sake. But if anyone says to you, this was offered to idols, do not eat it for the sake of the one who told you, and for your conscience sake, for the earth is the Lord's and all its fullness. Conscience, I say, not your own, but that of the other. For why is my liberty judged by another man's conscience? Mm.
All right, we're gonna we're gonna explain
Let's
what this
examine that.
means. Yeah. So Paul says, eat whatever is sold in the meat market, asking no questions because of your conscience. Knowing, you know what I mean? If you ask something and then you're made aware, then you're accountable for what you know,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now we're gonna talk about the meat market, right? So verse 28 says, if anyone says to you, this was sacrificed to idols, do not eat it because of the one pointing it out to you. See, they're making it aware, right? And on account of the conscience, for the earth belongs to Yahweh and all that fills it, right? So why would Paul say eat whatever is sold in the meat market, asking no questions because of conscience? All right. So we're still in this book after Paul left Corinth, right? What is it? The influence of secular ethics and social change. I hate that I have a glare on here. 13. This is called kosher food and idol meat. So this is about what we read, verses 25 to 28 in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. All right. Hopefully this won't be too long. All right. So Paul's ruling on meat bought in the market. Why didn't he deal with this matter while he was in Corinth? So we're going to talk about his unexpected command to buy and eat without question meat in the meat market. So the regular word for market is makelon. 25, makelon. We're going to talk about official food concessions for diaspora Jews. This is interesting. Josephus, you guys know Josephus, right? Josephus records an official decree which involved provision of kosher food and the resolution of the magistrates from the city of Sardis in Asia Minor, right? Remember that, Sardis. Sardis is a city in Asia Minor, Anatolia, okay? And it was passed by the council and the people, and it was dated October 47 BC. October 47 BC, not long before the founding of the colony of Corinth in 44 BC, right? So the people of Sardis indicating that the ancient custom of the Jews in that city were to be respected. The Jews, they're needing to follow the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High Yahweh set in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, right? So the ancient customs they needed to have also included a place to worship. And so the preamble of the decree began this way, BA. It says, the council and the people have pleaded that as their laws and freedom have been restored to them by the Roman Senate and people, who was they? They, the diaspora Jews, right? The Judeo-Christians. Right? They may, in accordance with their accepted customs, come together and have a communal life and adjudicate suits among themselves. Right? That a place be given them in which they may gather together with their wives and children and offer their ancestral prayers and sacrifices to God. The synagogue. Congregations are tabernacles, right? Yeah. So, permission. It says permission shall be given to them to assemble on sacred days, you know, the feast days found in Leviticus 23, right? To do things in accordance with their laws, the law of Moses, right? That a place shall be set apart by the magistrates for them to build and inhabit, so that the market officials of the city shall be charged with the duty of having suitable food for them brought in for sale in the marketplace. So anybody who says Christians back in the day didn't have rights from the colonies of the land to follow the law of Moses, they don't really know secular history. The Christians back in this day, first century AD, were still eating kosher, BA, according to Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14. Right? Let's continue. So this decree, I'm sorry, let me back up. Did you want to say something, BA?
No, I was looking at something that lines up with Deuteronomy 32, but let me let you finish, because there's a connection with what we just read, and it connects with Deuteronomy 32. So you go ahead and finish up, and we'll just get into it when you're done.
Okay, I'm gonna come in. I got a few more things to read, and then I want to hear that, BA. So the decree of Sardis was passed in the wake of the restoration of rights to the Jews by the Roman Senate and people. Right? They had the law of the land, make sure they had the right to follow the law, statutes, and commandments of the Most High Yahweh. And a copy of this decree the copy of this decree reflects the legal conventions and literary genre of a civic resolution. So the council and the people of Sardis had followed Rome's restoration of Jewish laws, and they're not necessarily Jewish, they're the Most High's laws, right? But they belong to the Israelites, the Hebrews, the Hebrew descendants of Abraham, right? So the council and the people of Sardis had followed Rome's restoration of these laws and privileges, and was seen specifically in the action on the part of the officials who regulated the market, including the sale of meat. This responsibility rested with the persons elected to oversee the commercial affairs of the city and adjudicate on commercial disputes. It said they are to have the right and power of managing the corn supply, right? So these elected officials, they have the power to manage the corn supply, the drains, the baths in the market, and checking weights and measures. And a later source stated they were granted the supervision of public market, which they came to be called agoranomoi, officials of the market, by those who put their names into Greek. And so the Sardis decree confirmed their jurisdiction over the meat market because they were charged with the responsibility for bringing in what was called suitable meat, kosher meat for the Jews or the Hebrews. So there is evidence elsewhere that the Romans took cognizance of the Jews' religious scruples and that the action of Sardis was not an isolated nor a fictitious one. In Rome itself, Jews were exempted from the ban against the right to assemble more than once a month. I want to read this real quick because this is good. This is good history background. So Dolabella, who was proconsul of Asia, exempted the Jews from military service because the Roman army could not issue them rations according to their laws and customs. And a number of other decrees mention a similar exemption, and that's in Antiquity of the Jews from Josephus, section 14.223 to 25. Okay, so Publius Servilius Galba, also a proconsul of Asia, listened to the arguments of representatives of Miletus and the Jews of that city and made the judgment in favor of the Jews, right? So it included managing their own produce in accordance with their customs, right? They were given rights to do their customs. For example, revenues destined for transmission. That's also in the same section, Antiquities of the Jews, book 14. So among special privileges accorded diaspora Jews as early as the end of the 4th century BC was a fixed sum of money from the gymnasiarchs in cities in the east to pay for their own kind of oil for the use on the body, and this was continued under the Romans. And we've seen that also accounted for in Antiquity of the Jews. Book 12. So it is important to note that kosher meat was one such Jewish need. Indeed, a Jewish law, a Mosaic law, pretty much, a custom derived from the Torah and a critical factor in what it meant to be a Jew in the diaspora, or what it meant to be an Israelite in the diaspora, right? So the Sardis inscription, right, archaeological people found in Sardis, in the city of Sardis in Asia Minor, right? This inscription showed that these Israelite rites had been terminated, preventing them from observing their ancient traditions, right? It also showed that their laws and freedom have been restored to them by the Roman Senate and people, and was provision for the securing of suitable food in the official marketplaces of cities in which they dwell. BA, I'd love to hear what you got to bring out.
Concerning 1 Corinthians chapter 10, there's a connection with Deuteronomy chapter 32. And let me get to it. You know me, I'll be going all over. I jump from 5 to 6 scriptures at a time, and I just be looking at stuff. Let me see. This is the Song of Moses. And okay. And we're going to pick it up in verse 15. It's talking about Israel. But Jeshurun grew fat and kicked. You grew fat and grew thick. You are obese. Then he forsook God who made him, and scornfully esteemed the rock of his salvation. There go that word rock. They provoke him to jealousy with foreign gods. With abominations, they provoke him to anger. They sacrifice to demons, not to God, or Yahweh, or Jehovah, or Elohim. To gods they did not know. To new gods, new arrivals. Whoa. The imperialists. Let's keep going. That your fathers did not fear. Of the rock who begot you are unmindful and have forgotten the Elohim who fathered you. And when the Lord saw it, he spurned them because of the provocations of his sons and his daughters. And he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end will be, for they are a perverse generation, children in whom is no faith. They have provoked me to jealousy by what is not God. They have moved me to anger by their foolish idols. But I will provoke them to jealousy by those who are not a nation. Just keep going. I will move them to anger by a foolish nation. For a fire is kindled in my anger and shall burn to the lowest hell. It shall consume the earth with her increase and set on fire the foundations of the mountains. And it just keeps going on, just the turmoil and destruction that the Most High has for idolaters.
Yeah, the Most High set in place that he don't like idol worship. There was no Elohim but him. You are to worship him and worship him alone. And Paul, we see
he knew this.
That Paul was reiterating Torah.
Exactly.
I mean, you just can't get around it. There's no way you can try to slice it and dice it. Paul was teaching Torah, and Paul was making sure that people, the Gentiles, the nations, were being taught Torah properly. BA. That's what he was doing, and he was making sure that they knew and understood how to follow Torah within the parameters of the colonies that they were in, because we see that the lands they were in, there were all sorts of laws imposed on the people. And so the students of Paul, they were like, how are we going to function? How are we going to worship the Most High Yahweh in the midst of these men who want to lord and rule and worship over us and impose these laws on the land and impose these laws on all of us? How are we going to? And Paul helped them out.
Go to Psalms 106 real quick.
Psalms, which chapter?
106.
106. Mm-hmm.
And we're going to pick it up at verse 32. This is talking about them in the wilderness.
Yep.
They angered him also at the waters of strife, so that it went ill with Moses on account of them, because they rebelled against his spirit, so that he spoke rashly with his lips. They did not destroy the peoples concerning whom the Lord had commanded them. I think that's with Joshua, I believe. But they mingled with the Gentiles. They served their idols, which became a snare to them. They even sacrificed their sons and daughters to demons. and shed innocent blood, the blood of their sons and daughters, whom they sanctified to the idols of Canaan. And the land was polluted with blood. They were defiled by their own works and played the
And
harlot by their own deeds.
right. Back up at verse 35. It says, they did not destroy the peoples, as Yahweh
Yep.
commanded them, but mixed with the nations and
Yeah.
learned their
Their
works.
ways and
They
ate the
learned the nation's
food.
ways.
Yeah.
Right. Are we saying not to eat? No, we're not saying don't eat. We're saying watch out what you eat and where you eat. And in the spirit when you're eating. There's
Yeah.
always a spirit behind it.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely. I know the other day at my job, on Friday, they asked, they were having some kind of dinner. And it's the holiday, so they were doing like a little Christmas dinner. And it was a whole bunch of us in the cafeteria, and I was the only one in there not eating. Everybody was looking at me like, "Man, you okay? Something wrong?" And no, I'm fine. No, not trying to get into no verbiage about why. Just no problem. I'm good. You know what I'm saying? You sure? We'll pack you up a plate to take home. No, 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 no. No problem. Go about your business and just do your thing. When you go ahead,
Like,
sis.
no, this is what we're saying is our experiences. What we're telling people is we face it too, and it gets a little rocky at first, but like the Father always makes a way to escape this temptation. Because the food, we're not saying that it don't look good. We're not saying that it's not good. We're you know what I mean. We just know why that food was made,
Mm-hmm.
and offerings of food are gifts. You know what I'm saying? So sharing our experiences of the temptations. I think people could learn something from that. We're no better than you. We're no more holier than thou. You know what I mean? We face it too. And so it's difficult out here, but it's doable. It's doable to say no. And you pray to the Father, you ask that's already in you to say no. You'll get through it. And this time will be over, it'll pass. It comes and goes real quick. But thank you for saying that, BA. This is, like I said, this woo wee. All right, let's continue. So we're talking about this meat market here. So we're gonna move further and talk about the Corinthian meat market. And according to Orator Aristides, who visited Corinth in AD 156, it was a kind of marketplace. So the word for marketplace in the Greek is agora, and it's a common courtyard of the Greeks, right? And its high frequency markets are said to have been everywhere, and they had shops, mart halls, and providing all things in life. Like the mall we have around us, the mall got clothes, it got food, it got shoes. It pretty much got everything in one place. That was this market, right? So the daily market was critical for a city, the population, which has been estimated to be 80,000 in the time of Paul. So the market, it included both meat and fish. It was controlled by civic authorities, and it was an important source of revenue for them. The imperial authorities retained a firm grip on all indirect taxes levied at these markets. So concerns of the Jews about meat, which had not been offered to idols, was critical to their religion. Of course, right? So we know that the meat were a substantial enterprise in Corinth, right? The market, you have people coming and going. And people coming and going to your market meant it was a nice, source of income, right? So the letter of Lucius Antonius, the proquaestor, he was the what is proquaestor? A magistrate associated with the proconsul in the administration of the province, right? So the letter of Lucius Antonius, it imposed on the officials of Sardis, right, in Asia Minor, the recognition of the Jews' rights as part of official policy in the Roman East. Okay, so and there's an inscription that also bears witness to the agitation of the Israelites for their rights and privileges. And so the presence of a considerable number in Corinth was not unknown in Paul's day, because a later inscription bears witness to their synagogue, right? You can read about that in Philo and Acts chapter 18, what we read earlier. So the above justifies the conclusion that in this Roman colony, official provision would also have to be made in the market complex for the Jewish community to secure kosher meat and other foods, right? So we're going to talk about when Paul was in Corinth, just a brief second. And then we're going to finish it with saying what happened after Paul left Corinth, right? So there was an essay by this guy named T. Rajat, by this woman named T. Rajat, and they were arguing the role of archi-synagogos. Archi-synagogos were like the first or principal in that province, right? And they were arguing about the role of the archi-synagogues was not a cultic one, but had far more to do with patronage and philanthropy, because this office was influenced by secular categories in the city-state in the early empire. But if she is correct, the term normally translated ruler of the synagogue could refer to the role of patron and philanthropist. So in the book of Luke records that the Israelites with one accord rose up and brought a criminal case against Paul to Gallio, the governor of the province, right? B.A. read that in Acts chapter 18, verse 12, right? And so the same passage recounts the aftermath of the failure of the Jews to secure a case against Paul. So Gallio dismissed them from the judgment seat, and some of the Corinthians into Sosthenes, the subsequent ruler of the synagogue, beating him before the judgment seat. The book of Luke also informs us that Gallio turned a blind eye because he cared for none of these things. And that's in so this action was one way that loyal Corinthians demonstrated their solidarity with the Roman governor. Compromise. So Roman citizens also saw it as a highly effective weapon. This was a public humiliation for the head of the Jews in Corinth. And so the Christian Jews, loud and clear, the Christian Jews were entitled to purchase meat that had not been offered to idols in the marketplace. So when people say Jesus' death allowed them to eat anything, that is not true. Christians were still following the law, statutes, and commandments of the Most High Yahweh, and they were making sure that they still had rights to have food in the meat market that was not sacrificed to idols. Somebody says, oh yeah, Jesus is dead, we can eat all things. No, not all Christians believe that. You see that here. Christians were still eating kosher. So Gallio's ruling was that the Jews' case against Paul was about an internal religious dispute. The questions about words and names and your own law, and not some criminal offense. So Christians, let me say this loud and clear too. Christians were entitled to purchase kosher meat there. And this may have been the reason that Paul needed to provide no tradition on the purchasing of idol meat in Corinth while he was there. That makes sense. If you're already entitled to purchase clean meat, then you don't need to you don't need to give a tradition on making those purchases, right? Because you already had a right to your Christian community that you needed to eat clean, kosher food according to the law, statutes, and commandments of the Most High Yahweh that He gave to Moses, right? So, if this was the case, then Corinthian Christians had been able to follow the Jerusalem Council's decision concerning food offered to idols. We see that in Acts chapter 15. And that was a decision that could only be implemented in Gentile cities where kosher meat was available in the official market. BA, you want to interject anything before I move on further?
Yeah, go to let's go back to Deuteronomy 32. It's something I missed too. Just want to add real quick, and then you can move on after I read it.
Oh no, you good. We got good time. Deuteronomy 32.
And we're gonna pick it up at verse. Let's go to verse. It's talking about Israel. And it reads, hold on for a second. Okay. And it reads, then they despised 24.
Okay.
Then they despised the pleasant land. They did not believe His word, but complained in their tents and did not heed the voice.
Hold on. What?
Okay, oh, I'm sorry. No, go to. I'm sorry. No, go to Psalms 1. I'm sorry, Psalms 106. I'm sorry. Psalms 106.
Back to Psalms 106. Okay.
Yeah, my fault.
No, you good. You good.
We're going to pick it up at verse 24. Yeah, because it's more I should have read earlier, but I forgot about it.
Okay.
And it reads at verse 24, Psalms 106, verse 24. Then they despised the pleasant land. They did not believe His word, but complained in their tents and did not heed the voice of the Lord. Therefore, He raised up His hand in an oath against them to overthrow them in the wilderness, to overthrow their descendants among the nations, and to scatter them in the lands they joined themselves also to Baal Peor, and ate sacrifices made to their dead.
You know where that is? Anything that the father has to punish the children for, and what he's accusing them for, they had to go against something, right?
Yeah.
They went against the Torah. Let's go to Numbers 25.
Yeah, that's exactly what that's it. Numbers 25.
Numbers 25. And this goes back to the meat sacrificed to idols. Let's just read, BA, if you could read Numbers chapter 25, verses 1 to 5.
Yep. Numbers 25. Oh, right there, right on the dot.
This is how serious the Most High is about what He commanding you to do and what He's commanding you not to do. And the thing is, whatever Yahweh calls something, that's what it is. You could try to call it just eating. You can try to call it just food. But we're going to see what the Most High call it. Go ahead, BA, if you're a believer.
And it reads, verse 1, Numbers 25. Now Israel remained in Acacia Grove, and the people began to commit harlotry with the women of Moab. They invited the people to sacrifice to their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel was joined to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel. Then the Lord said to Moses, take all the leaders of the people and hang the offenders before the Lord out in the sun, that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel. That is some serious business. And see, what's so crazy about that, sis, is that we know that Moses is dealing with, we understand Moses is dealing with a certain individual that the whole world loves. This is Christ, that this is the Most High, the image of the Most High that Moses is dealing with. He's dealing with the manifestation. He's dealing, you know what I'm saying? Because Christ said himself, no man has heard the voice of the Father. No man has seen his shape. The whole time Moses was dealing with Christ in his pre-existent stage. So this is Christ right here. This is Christ. The one they say, Jesus, 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 we love Jesus. Jesus just gave Moses an order in verse 4.
Period.
You read that one more time. Then the Lord said to Moses, take all the leaders of the people and hang the offenders. Jesus said that? Yes, sir. This is the voice of the Most High speaking to Moses, which we understand to be Christ. I just want to say that real quick. That's all.
No, read verse 5.
Let's read verse 5. So Moses said to the judges of Israel, every one of you kill his men who were joined to Baal Peor. So Moses took the order.
Right. So BA, Moses took the order. Because what does it mean to join yourself to Baal Peor? What are the activities, behaviors, and practices that constitute joining to Baal Peor?
Celebrating.
What did it say they was doing?
Dancing. Eating.
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 I want to talk about this thing bowing down for a second, BA, because people say, okay, I'm not worshiping because I'm not literally bowing my knee down. But the thing is, when you worship, you're actually putting some thing or somebody above yourself. You're giving them high honor and glory. You're saying that they're above you or higher than you. You're exalting them. So you don't have to literally bow your knee. BA, correct me if I'm off track.
Worship is your way of conduct.
Come on.
That's worship. So just because
it's your behavior and your practices, and when you worship somebody, when you worship in somebody, your behavior, your practice, and your conduct says this person that I'm worshiping or this thing that I'm worshiping is higher than me. It's more important than me. Wow. It's highly significant. Go ahead, B.
Nah, because that's the problem with people. People are they're so literal. Oh, as long as I'm not meditating, or no, it's idolatry. Worship goes further than literally bowing down.
Hallelujah.
It's like with the mark of the beast. It's planted in your mind and in your right hand. It's your thoughts and your actions. Idolatry, thought and your actions. You just do these things instantly. So idolatry is also so we can line up idolatry with having the mark of the beast.
Period. And worship is a lifestyle, being like you said. We worship the Most High Yahweh every day we breathe. We don't just wait to worship the Most High on the Sabbath. When people say they're equating, Sabbath days and Sundays to worship. No, the Sabbath day was not about worship. You know what I mean? You worship the Most High Yahweh every day by your actions, your behavior, and your conduct in the way that the manner of your deity laid out for you. That's worship. All right. You got anything else to say, BA, before I continue? All right, we're almost done. We're actually almost done. So, lastly, the section here called After Paul Left Corinth. So, it is suggested that as a move against the Jews, the provision of suitable food was officially withdrawn from the Corinthian meat market. And so, this deprived Christians of access to meat not offered to idols. Emperor Claudius, when he expelled the Jews from Rome, he was depriving them of their benefits and privileges which they enjoy. And so as a result, markets would no longer need to make special slaughtering arrangements for Jews in Rome. That sounds like some cold piece of work right there. So the meat market restoration signaled a polytheuma for the Jews. What is polytheuma? It signaled the rights of a form of government in the commonwealth and the citizenship for the Jews, and it signaled the right to bring matters to their own courts for resolution. And that was the gift of the land for the building of a synagogue and the right to observe the Sabbath, right? So when people say, oh, the Christians, they don't have to observe the Sabbath no more. No, yes they do, and yes they did. And this is after Yeshua buried and resurrected. The Christians, right, were observing the Sabbath. They were calling them Jewish Christians, right? Judeo-Christians, right? So Sardis, the city in Asia Minor, provided evidence of the restoration of the Israelites' rights, or the Christians' rights, following Rome's move with the provision of a place in the meat market where they could secure suitable food or meat. So the Jews against Paul in the early days of the Christian community, it was split because of these so-called criminal actions, right? But their case resulted in the worst possible outcome for them, for their hated enemy was given the protection and privileges of Jews. For it is therefore not impossible that subsequent to Paul's departure, the council and the people of Corinth officially discriminated further against the Jews by withdrawing some privilege. And an interesting first century parallel also exists with respect to the use of oil. And I want to talk about this for a second because, here. So an extant reference in that era refers to those Jews who did not want to use foreign oil. So in the late 60s AD, during the first Jewish revolt, the governor of Syria, Mucianus, he noted that Jews were allowed to continue to have this made available to them. And in Josephus, he's noting that there was an expectation that this special provision would be withdrawn because of the rebellion in Jerusalem, because Jerusalem was a city under the jurisdiction of the governor of Syria. Of oil was an imperial monopoly. There go that money again, right? So it is clear from what Paul wrote that all meat in Corinth was sold in the Macellum. It was sold in the market, right? So it had been offered in the idol temple, and his ruling suggested that this was so. Right? He commanded Christians to purchase and to eat it. If they were invited to a private dinner and were disposed to go, they were also told to ask no questions because there was none to ask, which meant there was nothing wrong with a Christian eating meat if provided by the host. But there was definitely one exception. BA, when a companion at a private dinner drew attention to the fact that it had been offered to idols because he thought that it was inappropriate for a Christian to eat it. So pretty much, if you were aware, if you were made aware that it was offered to idols, you wasn't supposed to eat it. If somebody invited you and you're not aware of anything going on, go ahead and eat it. But for us, people were making us aware of what they're inviting us over to eat for. So we're in the know. So if we're in the know, we know better. We're supposed to do better. We have no excuse to continue to eat. You want to say something, BA?
No, it just goes back to where the Most High will not come against you for ignorance. If you do something out of ignorance, he gives you that. But if you know, then
blood on your hands.
Exactly.
Straight up. So it was for the sake of the conscience of the latter who had kindly drawn attention to this fact, and not conscience of the Christian, for them to desist from eating. Okay, so those who had such a prohibition against eating food offered to idols used the traditional grace which allowed Christians to buy and eat that meat. But there's a question here. It says, did the Christian community raise the question about buying meat from the marketplace, or did Paul, right? They wrote about things offered to idols and eating things sacrificed to idols, okay? Because some members of the community were unsure what was appropriate Christian conduct. That makes sense, right, BA? Okay, so eating at a feast in an idol temple was one thing, although some were determined to exercise their inalienable rights to do so as citizens of Corinth. And the thing is, whether to buy meat consumption as the rest of Corinth did seems to have been a new issue. It suggested that after Paul left Corinth, the magistrates and the council moved against the community by withdrawing kosher meat from the market. And it would not be mistaken to postulate the existence of an official meat market in Corinth, part of which made provision for the special situation of diaspora Jews with suitable food. So given that the meat market was regulated by the city authorities, we can draw the conclusion that the difficulties addressed in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 25 to 29, quote unquote, to eat all that was sold in the meat market may have arisen because of the withdrawal of special provisions on kosher meat by officials in Corinth. So the thing is, BA, Paul said, you know, I'm gonna let you know about this issue, how to handle it. Pretty much, I know these people, the land, the laws of the land, these officials, these city officials, then took away the provisions for you to have kosher meat sold in the meat market. So all you got around, which is that meat market, you know, there may have been some meat sacrificed to idols, there may be some meat sacrificed to idols, but these provisions were taken away. The thing is, if you don't know, you just eat. If you do know, don't eat. Now, I'm gonna say this. When I go to the grocery store, BA, over here in Sacramento, right? I'm picking up meat. I'm picking up beef. I'm picking up pork. Excuse me, I'm not picking up pork. I'm not picking up pork. I'm not picking up pork. I'm picking up turkey and chicken. I'm not picking up pork. But the thing is, I know pork is sold there. I know the pork may be sitting next to the chicken and it may be sitting next to the turkey. So I know in my mind that if the pork is sitting there, how do I know that the beef wasn't cut up on the same table as the pork? You see what I'm saying? How do I know that the butcher didn't rinse his hands after cutting up the pork and then he cut up the beef and then put it, you know, in the freezer section for me to get it? But I have to go in there. I go into the grocery store and I'm like, okay, I'm picking up some chicken. I'm picking up some turkey. But how do I know that even this turkey, this chicken, and this beef is clean? How do I know that it was not sacrificed to idols? I don't know. I'm not held accountable. I'm just knowing that it's clean beef. The butcher can cut it. I mean, I don't know if he prayed since some libations over. You know, I don't know that. I'm just going in the grocery store and I'm buying kosher meat. And that's what Paul was saying. Like, dude, this is what you have available. In Sacramento, I got the meat market available. I don't have a butcher, by the way, you know, out here. So my thing is to go to the market. And that's what I want to say. And I'm pretty much done. Yeah, you got anything to bring out a little further?
You know what? What we brought out is enough. Everything to me sounds good, man. We went in, we looked at some historical sources, we made some clarity of a phase of one of the beginning stages of imperialism. Most High willing, in the coming weeks and months and down the line, we'll bring out more information. I'm like, it sounds like it's a wrap.
Yeah, and I wanted to send my encouragement out to those newcomers in this faith, in this walk. Stand firm and stand fast. Just stay prayerful, stay in conversation with the Most High. If you need me, reach out to me. I'll be there with you along the way. In the beginning stages, it is difficult to say no, but it's doable, and the Most High Yahweh does give you the strength. And there's a reward for you in heaven for enduring. There's a reward for you, kingdom, for enduring the temptation. And there's always a way provided to you by the Most High Yahweh to escape the temptation. I've been through it. BA has been through it, and I just want to encourage you and send my love out to you. And like the passage says, I can do all things through Christ. I can do all lawful things through Christ who strengthens me. And so you can do this. You can get through it. And every year, personal relationship, that time you spend with the Father, you'll get stronger and stronger, and you'll be able to withstand with no worries. And I know BA was talking about his experiences at work. I do experience it at work. I do experience it more so with the family and friends. They're saying, okay, this is family time. This is the time that you get together with your people and, have some fun, have some food, chop it up, drink a little bit. But I'm like, man, we got 300 and you know what I'm saying, to get together and converse and chop it up and play games. You know what I mean? So just encourage your family to say, hey, spend some time with me when your heart desires. Tell them you're here with open arms to hang out. Just those 3 days out the year that you don't. Ask them not to hold that against you so heavily. Tell them to cherish the other days and times that you spend with them. And I yield. Anything you want to close with, BA?
For all those, hold fast, meditate, stay in prayer. Keep your eyes on the prize, which is the Most High through Christ. And much love and shalom to all. And I just hope that your days are as less stressful as possible. And I'm going to fall back.
We love y'all. We love y'all. With the love of the Most High Yahweh through his son Yeshua. We hope this was a blessing. We hope this was edifying to you. We pray for the Most High's shalom and peace to be upon you and your family. This is 916 Shan on YouTube, Shan-t DoC on Facebook. Brother BA, thank you so much for joining in. And like I said, reach out to us. We'll be here. And until the next video, we say shalom, shalom. Y'all have a good and blessed evening. Lalato.